Welcome to the Agile Engineering Deep Dive podcast. I'm Alessandro Guida, and today we're taking a closer look at a ritual that every Agile team knows, yet many quietly struggle with: the daily stand-up. Stand-ups are meant to be short, energetic coordination huddles, but too often they drift into status reporting, passive listening, and a routine nobody feels inspired by. In this episode, we explore why this happens, how to bring purpose back into the conversation, and what simple patterns can turn your stand-up into a daily accelerator of flow, alignment, and teamwork. We'll look at practical techniques, common traps, and one real example from a regulated environment where a small shift unlocked a major improvement in predictability. Let's dive in.
We've all been there. It's, early morning, maybe 9:70 a.m., the video call pings, or you're standing around a whiteboard. It's the daily stand-up.
Right.
It's sold to us as this crisp, fast, 15-minute huddle, but somehow it so often just spirals into the day's first big energy drain.
It's a total paradox of modern work, isn't it? You're supposed to get synchronized, but instead you find yourself, mentally drafting your 3-sentence report while you're sort of politely waiting for everyone else to give theirs.
Yes.
It feels like an obligatory broadcast, not a real team effort.
That is the feeling, exactly. It's an exercise in sequential patience. I think we all know that internal monologue. Yesterday I did X, today I'll do Y, no blockers. Okay, please, the clock is ticking.
Yes.
Our sources for this really hammer home that the problem isn't the format itself, which is actually brilliant in theory. The problem is that we've confused the ritual with the purpose.
That phrase, ritual versus purpose, that's really the core of this entire deep dive. If you ask 10 teams, what's the purpose of your stand-up? I bet 8 of them would say it's a status report for the manager.
Or to show you were busy yesterday.
Or to show accountability, right?
Yeah.
And that is precisely the wrong answer.
Okay, so if it's not a status report, what is its actual job? What's it supposed to be doing?
Its job is to be a coordination huddle. And it's by the team. For the team. The sole purpose is for everyone to look at the work in front of them, quickly align, adapt to anything surprising that's happened, and this is the most important part, uncover opportunities to keep the workflow moving smoothly.
So if you don't coordinate, you've failed the meeting.
You failed the meeting. If you end it without having actually coordinated your efforts for the next few hours, you haven't held a stand-up. You've just hosted a synchronized soliloquy.
That definition just changes everything. We're taking a coordination tool and we're misusing it as an accountability tool.
Exactly.
So for this deep dive, we're going to explore why so many stand-ups fall into that ritual trap and then, provide the structural fix that transforms them. Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it. We can start by just isolating the points of failure. When we look at why stand-ups consistently become these boring time sinks, we see 3 main traps, and they all relate back to losing sight of coordination.
Okay, what's the first trap?
The first one is that they focus entirely on individuals, not the team. When the leader, or even just the template, starts with, what did you do yesterday, and what will you do today, the whole spotlight shifts to individual effort.
To heroism, almost.
For heroism, exactly.
Yeah.
The conversation becomes a series of these siloed micro-presentations that don't really connect to the shared objective.
But hold on, doesn't the manager or the project lead still need that individual status for their own reporting or for planning? I mean, if we don't focus on the individual, how do we track accountability?
That's a great question, because accountability is necessary, but I'd argue the stand-up is absolutely the wrong form for it. When we focus on the individual there, we fail at coordination.
How so?
Well, think about it. Say Jane finishes task A and starts task B, but task B is blocked by David. If we're going person by person, Jane might not mention that until 3 minutes into her detailed report on task A.
And by then, Dave is already tuned out, waiting for his turn.
Exactly. The information is too late, it's too siloed, and the team is forced to remember all these dependencies instead of just seeing them. That delay, that friction, it adds up.
That delayed friction, that leads us right into the second trap, doesn't it?
It does. Trap number 2 is no clear goal. If you have all these individual updates just flying around, but the team doesn't have a visible, crystal clear sprint goal or even just a shared priority for the day, it all becomes disjointed noise.
Everyone sounds busy.
Everyone sounds incredibly busy, but they lack shared direction. It's like everyone is rowing as hard as they can, but nobody's checking if the boat is pointing toward the right shore. It creates the illusion of productivity.
And when you have that noise and that individual focus, the coordination part just evaporates.
That's the third, and I think most destructive trap. No interaction. A stand-up has to facilitate real, spontaneous conversation. If everyone just delivers their line and moves on, the team is reporting, not coordinating. The flow of work just silently suffers.
I like the analogy one of the sources used for this.
The football huddle one.
Yes. It's like a football team huddle where every player announces their individual plan, but nobody makes eye contact.
Exactly. The crucial adaptive decisions, the I can help you with that moments, they just never happen.
So if the problem is that we're reporting history instead of coordinating the future, then the whole mindset has to shift pretty substantially. We have to stop asking, what did you do?
We have to. The conversation needs to fundamentally change its center of gravity. We need to move from that sort of defensive posture of reporting what we did to the collaborative one of figuring out what we'll do next.
So the reframed questions for a functional stand-up would be something like, what do we as a team need to accomplish today to move closer to our goal?
That immediately sets the shared direction.
Okay, and then where are we stuck? That's the vulnerability check.
And then the coordination engine itself. Who needs help or who can offer it? That last part is where the team starts to recognize its mutual responsibility. Success isn't about my tasks, it's about our goal.
Shifting the focus from the individual to the goal. That leads us right to the main structural fix we found in the research. And here's where it gets really interesting. We need to stop walking the people and start walking the board.
This is the single most effective pattern for fixing a break in stand-up. It just is. Because it forces the focus back onto the work, which is the thing that actually defines the team's goal. If your meeting is failing because it's too focused on who did what, the solution is simple. Get the who out of the center of the conversation.
Okay, explain the mechanics here. Because for teams that are really entrenched in that round-robin style, this is a huge change. What does it actually look like in practice?
So picture your Kanban or your task board. Could be physical stickies on a wall or, digital on a big screen. Instead of going, host, what's your status? You look at the board. And you start with the item that's furthest along in the workflow.
Furthest to the right, you should.
Furthest to the right, exactly. Maybe a story that's waiting for final acceptance. You focus on the work item itself.
So we go story by story.
You go story by story or task by task. The leader, or often just the person responsible for that item, pulls it up, and the team asks the key questions about that specific work. The focus is entirely on flow. Is this story moving? Why is it stuck? What does it need to get to the next column?
I can see how that immediately brings dependencies to the surface. If story A is stuck because it needs a piece of code for Mark, well, Mark gets pulled into the conversation the moment the team looks at story A. It doesn't matter where he is in the line.
Exactly. The work itself drags the right people into the necessary coordination moment. When you walk the board, you naturally start at the right, the side closest to done, and move left. This keeps the focus on delivering value, not just on starting new work. You see the waste and the bottlenecks instantly.
This sounds really intuitive, but what about for a remote team or a team with a huge, complex digital board? How do you keep that same sense of focus when you're not all physically looking at the same wall?
It definitely requires discipline, screen sharing, and someone has to be designated to drive the focus. When you're discussing story A, only story A should be visible or at least highlighted. The power here is visual. It makes latent problems obvious to everyone at the same time. The leader has to point, click, or gesture to anchor the conversation to that one piece of work. It prevents the conversation from drifting.
And this whole framework is what enables the interaction that we said was missing in Trap 3.
It absolutely does. And interaction doesn't just mean talking. It means creating the habit of matching blockers with helpers. When the team looks at a stuck story and asks, what's the bottleneck? And the person says, I need clarification on the API docs. The team member who wrote those docs is now obligated to respond right then and there.
That's where self-management comes from.
That's it. Those little micro interactions, they build collective responsibility way more effectively than any top-down mandate could.
The format enforces the behavior. Okay, let's talk about the practical guidelines that make this coordination machine run efficiently, because the whole point is to respect the team's time.
Right. Speed and discipline are non-negotiable here. The first rule has to be rigid. Time box it. 15 minutes maximum. And that 15 minutes is only enough if, and this is a big if, you stick to the next rule.
Which is the essential part. If a discussion gets too deep, say a technical debate or a complex design choice, you take it offline. immediately.
That is the whole efficiency factor. The stand-up is a diagnostic session, not a problem-solving session. You identify the stuck item, you identify the helper, and you coordinate the follow-up meeting for right after the stand-up ends. You never, ever hold the entire team hostage for a two-person deep dive.
And the second practical step ties right back to the problem of having no clear goal.
Yep. Make the sprint goal visible. Start the meeting by just repeating it or pointing to it. Even if the goal hasn't changed in 2 weeks, starting with that reminder just sharpens the whole conversation. Every update, every blocker, it instantly becomes relevant or irrelevant based on its impact on that goal.
Okay, now we have to talk about the biggest psychological hurdle. Even if we walk the board, we're still dealing with human nature. People often feel this need to, justify their existence for the day, which leads them right back to summarizing personal accomplishments.
And that's where the culture of listening has to take over. We have to internalize that for a stand-up to work, listening is exponentially more important than talking. If you're just waiting for your turn to speak, your team isn't a coordinated unit. It's just a collection of nervous individuals waiting to report compliance.
So if a team member isn't preparing a status report anymore, how should they mentally prepare for this new kind of stand-up?
They need to shift from that defensive prep, what did I do, to a collaborative prep. I think we should encourage them to ask themselves one question. What information do I have that is relevant for the work on the board and helpful to my team today?
That reframes the whole purpose from personal accountability to communal contribution. It moves you from defense to offense.
Absolutely. The critical mindset shift is from, I did X and Y yesterday and I feel good about it, to the team-focused statement, here's what matters for us today relative to the goal. And that's psychologically difficult. It means giving up the comfort of personal compliance and embracing collective vulnerability.
To really bring this home, let's talk about that fascinating real-world anecdote from the sources. It just perfectly illustrates the danger of politeness and the power of this cultural shift. This was a dev department working under really strict regulatory requirements.
That's right. This was an environment where processes were, very strictly followed. They had stand-ups every day, exactly 15 minutes, mandatory attendance. But the culture was one of pure formality. The meetings were just these 15-minute status broadcasts.
All talk, no coordination.
Zero coordination. It was all scheduled afterward, privately. And you had competent people, a structured environment, yet their deliveries were chronically slow and unpredictable.
And the most surprising fact about this highly professional environment.
Deliveries were consistently delayed, often by a lot, yet nobody ever mentioned blockers.
Wow.
That is the smoking gun of a broken coordination culture. If work is delayed but people are reporting no blockers, it means the team has internalized that raising a problem is a sign of weakness.
Or an embarrassment.
Or an embarrassment, yes, instead of seeing it as a necessary action for the team to succeed.
So the leader observed this behavior silently for a few days, the reports, the lack of eye contact, the polite passage of time, and then came the intervention, which was just brilliantly simple.
It really was. The leader didn't roll out a new process or a fancy template. They just paused the round robin and asked the one question that broke the politeness dam.
What was it?
They just asked, is anyone stuck? And just being polite about it.
That gets right to the heart of it. Organizational trust.
It opened a floodgate. The team started revealing all these small issues, a missing database credential, a slight misinterpretation of a spec, a dependency that wasn't quite ready, things they didn't feel were big enough to interrupt the formal broadcasts for.
And those were the silent killers.
Those small, polite, unmentioned issues were the silent killers of flow. They were accumulating every single day.
So the fix wasn't about enforcing more discipline. It was about changing the purpose of the meeting and the culture around being vulnerable.
Correct. They immediately switched to walking the board, they made the goal visible, and they used the 15 minutes solely for diagnostics and coordination. And the most important change was that the leader relentlessly reinforced that saying, I need help, was not an admission of failure. It was an act of strength and a commitment to the team's goal.
And the outcome.
It speaks for itself. That team became one of the most predictable and collaborative units the coach had ever worked with, purely by changing the structure and culture of those 15 minutes every morning.
So what does this all mean for you listening?
I think it means that your stand-up is probably your most powerful daily diagnostic tool if you use it correctly. An efficient stand-up isn't about discipline for its own sake. It's about creating the shortest possible path to alignment, flow, and real teamwork.
And when teams coordinate around the work, the actual items on the board, Instead of just reporting on the self, that's when things change.
That's it. Blockers surface early, predictability goes way up, and collaboration becomes the default mode, not the exception.
So if your team stand-up is feeling stale, you probably need a tonal shift and a structural shift. You have to push past that politeness barrier and the ritualized reporting. It takes courage from a leader to admit that the current ritual just isn't working.
And to help you start that shift, maybe even today, you need a question that instantly changes the depth of the conversation, one that forces people out of that comfort zone of just individual reporting. I recommend trying this one question in your next stand-up. What's the biggest risk to our sprint goal today?
That immediately focuses everyone on mitigation, on the collective goal, and on the future, not the past. So take that question with you and consider this final thought. What's truly stopping your team's flow? Is it technical difficulty? Or is it just a bit too much politeness and a fundamental lack of coordination? The pattern to fix it is now clearly in view.
Thank you for listening to the Agile Engineering Deep Dive podcast. If today's episode gave you new insight into working across teams or highlighted the role of discipline in achieving real agility, feel free to share it with your colleagues or your network. You can find the full written article along with previous episodes in the Agile Software Engineering newsletter on LinkedIn. And if you have thoughts, questions, or examples from your own organization, I'd be happy to hear from you. Your experiences help shape what we explore next. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next episode.